Hi, I'm Matt Doran. In Sydney, as in most great cities, news of a murder is not seen as anything particularly unusual. But one brutal killing in Sydney's western suburbs in 1986 was so breathtakingly cruel and so heartbreaking that it inflamed the emotions of ordinary Australians everywhere. It was the abduction, rape and murder of a woman described as a living angel, nurse and former charity beauty queen, Anita Cobby. Blacktown is a bustling satellite city 41 kilometres west of the heart of Sydney. It's always been a generally safe and pleasant area for families to live. It's here Gary and Grace Lynch have raised their two daughters, Anita, 25, and Catherine, 20. Gary has worked hard all his life as a graphic artist with the Air Force. Grace has enjoyed a long career as a nursing sister, and eldest daughter, Anita, has chosen to follow her mother's career path.
She didn't always want to be a nurse, but somehow she decided she wanted to do something with her life, and she became a nurse, and she really enjoyed it. She really loved it. She was a beautiful person. She'd grown up into a beautiful young lady.
She was the quintessence of dignity. Yeah, that'd be it.
Julia Shepherd is the author of the best-selling book about Anita called Someone Else's Daughter, and will become a close confidant of the Lynch family.
She'd been married to John Cobby. She had been married for several years to John, and he was a nurse as well. And they'd been travelling around Europe, and when they got back, things fell apart a little bit and they decided to separate. And even though they were separating, they remained good friends, and so Anita had moved back home to her parents' place until she got on her feet and worked out what she was going to do with her life.
In the mid-80s, Lynn Bradshaw joins the nursing staff at Sydney Hospital and vividly recalls meeting the woman who will become one of her closest friends.
Anita was generally interested in people. She loved people. You know, patients weren't just an appendix or a heart attack. She knew how many children they had. She knew their grandchildren's names, knew what they did for a living. She loved people, was interested in people.
It's Sunday, February 2nd, 1986. Anita Cobby has just finished her day shift in the surgical ward of Sydney Hospital and has arranged to go to dinner with her friends and colleagues, Lynn Bradshaw and Elaine Bray.
We got changed and headed off up to a Lebanese restaurant that Anita knew of. Stopped at the bottle shop, got some wine and headed out to dinner. Had a great time, three of us, just talking, making plans, you know, generally being three young women, giggling, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then we left. It wasn't a late night. We said goodbye to Elaine, and I asked Anita if she wanted to lift to the station, and I drove her to the station.
Thank you so much.
She said, I'll see you tomorrow. I said, yeah, see you then.
Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Bright and early. Bye. See ya.
And that was the last words we spoke. She walked off to catch the train home.
On the other side of town, 40 kilometres away, 5 young men, all with troubled lives and each with a string of criminal convictions, are drinking at a pub. All 5 live in relatively squalid conditions in a public housing estate in the Duneside area, a high unemployment precinct adjacent to Blacktown.
That's the way to go, son.
John Travers, 18, is the leader of the Gang of 5.
Yeah, nice, Trav.
He has a long history of drug abuse, violent assault and cruelty to animals. He and his mates have often assaulted young women and indulged in gay bashing.
All right, take it.
Travers considers his violent nature to be a badge of honour. Michael Murdoch, also 18, idolises Travers and copies his every move,
Here you go, boys.
including body piercing and tattoos. He too has a string of convictions such as car theft, burglary and drug possession. The other three at the hotel that night are brothers, the Murphy boys. The oldest, Michael, is a prison escapee. He'd previously spent 10 years in jail for armed robbery and is serving an 8-year sentence for burglary and larceny when he escapes from Silverwater Prison.
How's that?
On this particular night, 2 months later, he is still on the run. His younger brothers, Gary and Les, are following in their older brother's footsteps. They too have a litany of criminal convictions: drugs, stealing, assault, all the usual street crimes. John Travers often takes his sexual activities to an unimaginable and frightening level, even with animals.
Mate, I needed earplugs for that shit.
He was known for buying sheep or getting a sheep. His party trick was to jump on the sheep. I had one fellow tell me that he'd had sex with a sheep, cut its throat, and then he would roast it on a spit in the backyard. And he would do that regularly. A complaint had been made against him and Western Australia police were chasing him, but he'd eluded them, where he'd raped a teenage boy there with others and was on the run. But it was quite a savage rape, and the victim required hospital treatment.
Let's go get some coin, boys.
Although well fired up by alcohol, the group still isn't satisfied and seeks further gratification through drugs. As they climb into the car to pick up the drugs, they eventually realise that between them, they can't even rustle up enough money to put petrol in the near-empty stolen car. They decide to rob someone. But there's more criminal fun to be had. In an evil pact, they agree that rape will be part of the night's entertainment. Meanwhile, Anita Cobby's train is wending its way towards Blacktown. What happens next will send shockwaves through an entire nation. Anita Cobby and the Gang of Five have never met, but tragically their paths are about to converge. Their worlds are about to collide. It's almost 10 p.m. on Sunday night, February the 2nd, 1986, and 25-year-old nurse Anita Cobby has finished her shift at Sydney Hospital and is arriving at her destination, Blacktown Station, 40 kilometres west of Sydney. The family home in Sullivan Street is about 2 kilometres away.
She did attempt to ring her dad, but the phones were out. And there weren't any taxis at the cab rank, so she decided to walk home, which was around about a half an hour walk. And I often think of her walking along the streets away from Blacktown railway station, and I think because she'd grown up there and it was a hot summer's night, she felt very comfortable in her own area. It was her own territory, and I don't think she would have sensed any danger walking away from the station that night.
She was in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was walking home, minding her own business. We had the car full of the Murphys and Murdoch and Travers. Michael Murphy was an escapee from jail. Travers was mad, violent, would do anything.
The five men are hell-bent on violence and more than willing to follow Travis's lead.
This one on the left, eh?
They spot Anita and decide she's the one.
Mickey, do a trap next to her, in front.
Go, mate, get her! Get her, mate! Yeah! Right!
Two jump out and grab her. Kicking and screaming, she's dragged into the car.
Shut up, bitch!
They were driving around the car after they got her, and they'd stripped her off pretty well straight away in the back of the car. They'd punched her. Her nose was broken. Both the cheekbones had abrasions on them.
While Anita is being brutalised in the back of the car, they brazenly pull into a service station.
Someone holds a knife at her throat, tells her to be quiet. Lays her down on the floor behind the front seats. And someone fills up with petrol.
Nothing in here. Where is it, bitch?
They go to a handbag, they took the money out of her purse, paid for the petrol, and then went down to Green Park to carry on with it.
The abductors have decided to take the terrified and brutalised Anita to nearby Reen Road behind the Blacktown Drive-In Theatre. It's a semi-rural area, poorly lit and largely uninhabited, so it's a well-known lover's lane and a dumping place for stolen cars, or worse. Anita's nightmare may well have ended back at Newton Road where she was abducted, but fate has conspired against her.
She came so very, very close to getting help because there was a young girl, a 13-year-old girl, and her brother at home who heard the screams in a house almost directly adjacent to where she was dragged in. And they ran outside and saw the car, saw what was happening,
Let it go!
and the car disappeared into the darkness.
Their older brother, Paul McGoy, arrives home a few minutes later.
Just there. I think it was like an old holiday. They've taken a girl, they've pulled up, they've taken a girl. They dragged her into the car and they've taken off up that way, straight up that way. I've called the cops. They've taken her right.
I spoke to my brother and sister, and they were hysterical of what they've seen. My sister saw Anita get dragged into the car, and my brother attempted he chased the vehicle on barefoot and tried to open the rear door. He almost got there, but the car took off. I decided to go look for Anita while my brother and sister waited for the police, and I drove around a few locations. And I drove down a lover's lane, as they call it, Reen Road. And passed a couple of cars on the left-hand side. Went down, I done a U-turn. I had a spotlight out at the time and come across an empty HT Holden on the side of the road. And I had the spotlight into the paddock looking around to see if I could see anyone. Little did I know that they were lying down, hiding from me, hiding in the grass from my lights.
Paul mistakenly believes that the car he spotted is not the one he's searching for. He believes he's looking for a different model Holden. He heads home to check on his brother and sister. Local police go to Newton Road, take the McGoy's statements and one from another witness, and make a report, but nothing comes of it that night. Now, feeling free to commit whatever atrocities they want, the 5 men violate and torture Anita at will.
I think by the time she got down there, 1 if not 2, they probably already had sex with her in the car. She'd been forced through the barbed wire fence rather than thrown over it or helped over it. Absolutely dragged through it. She had defensive wounds where she tried to stop doing what they were doing with the knife. She grabbed the knife and they pulled it out of her hands. Knuckles and her fingers were broken. They had anal and vaginal sex with her. Nothing more worse that you could think of.
They were talking about whether they should let her go or what should happen, and it was decided, because she had heard their names and that she'd seen their faces, that she couldn't live.
What the hell are we gonna do? Hey, do your thing, Travis.
Yeah, do your thing, mate. Yeah, do your thing.
Yes.
Do that. Go on, mate. She knows our names.
She was lying face down at that point, and John Travers jumped on her back, grabbed her by the back of the head. She was conscious at that time because Joe Maloof, the coroner, said that she had defence wounds on her hand, and she'd put her hand up to stop that knife, and he'd almost severed several of her fingers.
Travers commits the final atrocity. The job done, he rushes back to his mates.
Quick, go. Cut her throat. How'd it feel, mate? Like nothing.
Their bloodlust satisfied, the five now care only about covering their tracks. They decide to get rid of all the evidence, except for Anita's body. With her clothes still in the car, they drive to John Travis's home at Duneside. They light a fire in the backyard and burn them.
Great night, eh?
Later, they scrape up the ashes and get rid of them. Unbeknown to them, a neighbour is peering over the fence. The gang then drives off in the stolen car and abandons it in nearby bushland after setting it on fire. They're now satisfied there is nothing to tie them to Anita Cobby's pack rape and cold-blooded murder. It's close to midnight on Sunday, February 2nd, 1986, and Gary Lynch is still awake, wondering why Anita hasn't arrived home. Maybe she's stayed with friends in Sydney, but why hasn't she called? He walks to the window and peers into the night.
I saw this cloud. As I looked at it, it formed into a fiendish, ghoulish face. Absolutely sadistic. Couldn't understand why I was experiencing this. It was like the face of all evil, if you could imagine.
Lynn Bradshaw experiences her own psychic phenomenon that night.
And I woke about 11 o'clock in an absolute cold sweat. I'd had this dream. I couldn't see Anita, but I could hear her voice. And we were, again, having a banter, just, I'm not coming to work tomorrow. And I said, why? Why aren't you coming to work tomorrow? And she said, I'm dying. And I said, don't be stupid, you come to work tomorrow. And she said, no, Lynn, I'm dying. And with that, that's when I woke up. And it doesn't sound scary, but I was an absolute cold sweat. I got out of bed. I remember I checked under the beds, I checked the windows, I checked the doors. I was absolutely terrified. When I checked with the police later, I found that around 11:30 was the time she was killed. So it was awful.
The next morning, Grace Lynch looks into her daughter's bedroom.
And I said to Gary in the morning, Anita didn't come home. She probably stayed with friends, which she did from time to time, especially if she was working late and had to start early in the morning. But it wasn't due to start until the afternoon the next day, and she had decided to come home so that she could have a good sleep.
At Sydney Hospital, alarm bells are ringing.
Anita was very reliable. I've had phone calls from Anita when she thought she was going to be late for work. So to not turn up, to not be at home, to not have let anybody know where she was not like her. And I just had that awful feeling.
And then we knew something had happened, and so I said to Gary, we have to go and report it to the police, which we did.
At Blacktown Police Station, the constable who takes the missing persons report is stunned when he looks at a photo of Anita and realises he went to school with her. It won't be long before many Australians will feel a similar personal connection as they are gripped by grief and revulsion over this horrendous crime. It's 11 a.m. on Tuesday, February 4th, 1986. A farmer, John Reen, notices his cows milling inquisitively around an object in his paddock at Prospect. Investigating, he is horrified by his discovery.
I just couldn't believe it was a human there laying in the paddock. I thought it was, you know, a doll or something at first.
Detective Sergeant Graham Rosetta, a highly experienced and dedicated investigator attached to Blacktown detectives, is one of the first called to the scene.
Two things that stick out of my mind. One, the hideous gash across the throat, and the look on her face, the look of agony on her face, and there are obviously other marks on the body, but they're the two things that stand out, the fact that she was so helpless.
Homicide and crime scene investigators are called in.
I think the thing that struck me most was that her head was, or her neck was very severely lacerated, and at one stage when the examiner rolled the body over to have a look at the frontal section of the body, that the head was very, very loose, attached to the torso. So it was more or less as if her neck and head had been completely severed, and that was a fairly traumatic thing to look at. Took a ring off her fingers. That was the only significant object that was found in the area. Not even an ounce of clothing, nothing at all, but this Russian interlocking wedding ring on her finger.
The moment the young station officer who took the original missing persons report hears that a female body has been found, he fears the worst and rushes to the scene with Anita's photograph. He approaches Homicide Detective Constable Gary Heskett.
Ian and I looked at the photograph and the body, and we had no doubt in our mind it was the same person. So armed with this information and an address, we decided then to head off over to Sullivan Street, Blacktown, to speak to the parents. All the police trained in the world never seems to prepare one for these sad and sorrowful, dark occasions.
They had a wedding ring. Our daughter was here at the time, our daughter Catherine, and she identified it, the ring.
Detectives also interview Anita's estranged husband, John Cobby, and he confirms the ring is the one he had given his wife at their wedding.
We then had to do the formal identification of the body at the morgue. Detective Kenny and I discussed who was the stronger, Gary or Grace. We both decided it was Gary's job to go and identify the body.
I could see they were upset, very agitated, fearful of my reactions. And I said to them, I said, now look, I want you to understand that if this is as bad as it's beginning to look, rest assured that we will see it through. We'll see it through to the very end.
At some stage, his legs buckled under him, and I remember Gary Heskett and myself just grabbed hold of him and held him upright, and then he composed himself. He said, I wish I could say it was somebody else's daughter, couldn't I? But then they'd have to go through what we're going through.
The matron at Sydney Hospital breaks the news to the nursing staff.
It was like walking to the gallows, just walking, and you knew, but you hoped. And as we walked into the matron's office, there was Marilyn sitting there, and she'd obviously been crying. And I walked in, and the matron had obviously been crying, and I think I was screaming before she told me anything. So.
A 20-man homicide investigation team sets up headquarters at Blacktown Police Station. They check Anita's last movements. Did she catch a taxi? Did she accept a lift? Or, in fact, did she walk? Meanwhile, detectives suggest a grieving Gary Lynch visit the scene of his daughter's murder.
It was actually a little area where there was, I believe, some of her blood on the grass. You know. That I wanted to grab that and put it in my pocket and take it home, but I couldn't. I just had to look at it, know what it was, and go away with a heavy heart.
Detectives are shown a written report that several members of the public heard screaming and saw a woman being dragged into a Holden sedan in Newton Road at about 9:50 on the night of Anita's disappearance.
Shut up, bitch!
After interviewing those witnesses, including the McGoys, they are confident it was Anita and that she must have been walking home. Detective Gary Raymond is one of the investigators.
But at this point in time, we didn't know who they were or where they were. And the real fear that we had, and we're looking at each other saying, you know, are these offenders going to offend again?
The media descends en masse and has become aware of some of the gruesome details of the murder. As a consequence, a stunned and angry public also learn of the barbaric final moments of the nurse and much-loved local charity queen. Even the then Premier, Neville Wran, who had once crowned Anita Miss Western Suburbs, becomes personally involved, demanding constant updates from police. They decide to invite the media to a reenactment of Anita's train ride and attempted walk home. It prompts an avalanche of calls, but none offers a breakthrough. Then, an informant gives detectives a piece of information that will eventually prove vital. He tells police that a car similar to one described in the abduction had been stolen and used by Les Murphy, Michael Murdoch and John Travers. This is the first time their names are thrown up. A background check reveals Travers's extremely violent nature. The detectives decide it's time to question Travers, Murdoch and Les Murphy. The informant has told detectives that the stolen car has very distinctive chrome wheels, and during a series of raids they find the distinctive chrome wheels on Les Murphy's car.
I need to know more about that knife. It had blood on it and it was at your home.
It's for killing sheep. I kill sheep with it.
Detective Sergeant Rosetta recalls a most chilling interview with John Travers, particularly when he brings up the subject of a knife smeared with animal blood found at his Duneside home.
I don't believe you, John.
He made a denial in words that I will never ever forget.
I didn't touch them.
His denial was something which probably went more to convincing you of his guilt than anything else. And he came out and said,
I didn't slit that slut's throat.
And his use of the word slut was something that made my mind up anyway, that John Travers had in actual fact had been the main perpetrator.
I didn't slit that slut's throat.
All right then.
All three are charged with car theft. They claim to have been at home watching television on the night of Anita's murder. John Travers is kept in custody. Michael Murdoch and Les Murphy are released on bail and placed under 24-hour surveillance. Officers then discover a bizarre plot to free Travers. Senior homicide detective Kevin Rowe is part of the investigating team.
He attempted to arrange with Leslie Murphy and others false passports. Bizarre as it sounds, they talked about arranging for a derailment of a train at the back of the Blacktown police station to create a diversion. Now, clearly they weren't intending to escape because of a stolen car. So clearly our belief and our suspicion, if you like, was confirmed.
Meanwhile, from his cell, John Travers makes a seemingly innocuous request that will blow the case wide open and leave an outraged public screaming for revenge. The abduction and barbaric torture, rape and murder of Sydney nurse Anita Cobby has set in motion not only a massive police investigation, it has sparked fury and anger from an outraged public. All sections of the media play a vital role in keeping the horrific crime in the public's conscience.
I feel very angry and bitter, I think. At first, of course, you felt sympathy, and then that changes straight away to sort of an anger, I think, more than anything.
Police have charged 3 men with car theft, a car they believe is linked to the murder. However, 2 of them, Les Murphy and Michael Murdoch, have been bailed and are under 24-hour surveillance. John Travers remains in custody. Detectives are certain all 3 have been involved in Anita's murder, but they don't have enough evidence.
You're lying, John.
Then a simple and innocuous request sets into motion some amazing events.
Yeah, what? Can you call my auntie up? Tell her to bring me down some smokes? What's the number?
Travers asks his guard to contact a female acquaintance and ask her to bring him cigarettes. The guard gives the woman's phone number to Detective Kevin Rowie, who calls her and arranges a meeting.
Detective Rowie from Blacktown Police.
Later that evening, I travelled to a sporting club in Wentworthville, a nearby suburb, and I was able to meet with this person in the car park and had a very enlightening conversation with her in relation to the person Travers and some of his associates. She talked about what she believed to have been sexual assaults committed by the person Travers, and she talked about his attitude towards women and some of his rather strange and disturbing behaviour involving violence and the use of knives. She effectively told me that she believed, although she didn't know, that Travers was involved in the murder.
The woman is well known to Travers and she's terrified of him, but she bravely agrees to deliver the cigarettes to his cell and report back to police if he says anything of significance.
After the conversation finished, I met her back at the police station door, allowed her into the station, took her to the rear of the station. She collapsed and was quite emotional. We carried her up the stairs to the detective office.
And she was shaking like a leaf. She turned around and she said, "It's them, it's him."
It's him. It's Michael Murdoch.
And she gave us the
Murphy.
list of names of the others.
Gary Murphy. And Michael Murphy. It's all of them, they all did it.
What we needed to do then was to get what was said on paper, get a statement from her saying exactly what the conversation had taken place, what information she could give us. So we had that, but that statement then just becomes her word against his, without any corroboration. So we, the next step was then that I applied for a listening device so that she would wear a recorder, and our intention was to send her back in if she was willing to do it, to see if we could get her again to strike up a conversation with him where he volunteered information on the murder. She agreed.
The woman becomes known as Miss X. Her life is in extreme danger and she becomes a protected witness. What you're about to hear are excerpts of the actual confession of a cold-blooded killer. Some of the admissions are far too gruesome to be broadcast. We have substituted Miss X's voice to protect her identity.
John, come close. Why? Why'd you have to stop her?
We're all drunk. She's not concerned all of us.
She saw your faces. got your names. And you knew. The other said you had to do it. Who said it had to be done? You? You all agreed? That's not your thing, John, is it? You haven't done that before, have you? Truthfully, that's the first. Don't laugh, it's not funny, John.
They weren't going to do it, so I had to.
And the rotten bastards all fucked off on you. I do, John. I still love you.
Investigators now have all the evidence they need to make arrests. In a series of nighttime raids, they snare Michael Murdoch and Les Murphy, but Gary and Michael Murphy are nowhere to be found. Back at Blacktown Police Station, the interrogations are intense. Michael Murdoch and Les Murphy finally crack and tell all.
Fine, all right. We did what we did. It was Travers. Travers cut a throat.
When Detective Sergeant Rosetta confronts Travers with the details of their confessions, Travers glares and asks,
He gave us up. Was it Les? Did Les give us up?
Their story was, and Travers' story was also, that after they'd raped her, they suddenly decided that she would have to be killed because there was a possibility she could identify them.
Do your thing, Travis. Yeah, do your thing, mate. Yeah, do you know it? Yes.
So they killed her. I always been the belief that it was more than likely their intention to not only abduct and rape a woman that night, but they were prepared simply by the fact that Travers had this knife with him. They were prepared to go one step further and commit a murder that same night. So what I'm saying is I don't believe that it was simply a matter of out of fear of being identified that they decided that she had to die.
Although they'd ditched the knife, Travers tells them where he bought it. Detectives then buy a similar knife, and Travers agrees it's like the one he used to kill Anita.
She's a beauty, isn't she?
It's 4 a.m. on February 24th when Detective Sergeant Ian Kennedy phones Grace and Gary Lynch and suggests they get up and put the kettle on. He's coming around with some important information.
So I knocked on the door and went in, and I just said, look, I've got some good news for you. We've just charged 3 men with Anita's murder. And the worst part is there's another 2. We've got 2 more to get, and we're looking for them.
I thought, my God, our little girl, fire monsters, you know, because that's what they were.
At first light, police take the 3 men individually to the scene of the crime, where each recounts in minute detail exactly what occurred. A few hours later, radio stations break the news. 3 men have finally been charged with Anita Cobby's murder. Police are still hunting 2 more.
We got them out all right, but when we were coming back to the police station, the crowds were 10 and 15 deep. From the driveway to the police station, up the road, people along the streets, people hanging over the edges of buildings on rooftop car parks with a noose hanging down with signs.
Let the public fix him!
And as we inched forward through this gap of people, they were rocking the car and banging their fists on the window, and I mean it was just mob violence. But it was quite scary, really quite scary.
At noon, Leslie Joseph Murphy, John Raymond Travers and Michael James Murdoch appear in Blacktown Local Court, charged with the abduction, rape and murder of Anita Lorraine Cobby at Prospect on February 2nd, 1986. They are remanded without bail, while the hunt for Michael and Gary Murphy intensifies. Their descriptions are circulated Australia-wide and to all national media. On February 26, after a series of tip-offs from members of the public, police raid a house at Glenfield in Sydney's southwest.
As soon as we kicked the door in, Gary Murphy ran out the back of the house. I understand he ran into the backyard and ran into a fairly large swash fellow who threw him against the fence on the ground. They jumped on him and handcuffed him. Michael Murphy was sitting on the lounge just looking at me holding a little baby.
Handcuffed, Michael and Gary Murphy are driven to Blacktown, where they too are charged with the abduction, rape and murder of Anita Cobby. Detectives Kennedy and Heskett visit the lynchers again to break the news they've got them all. On February 2nd, 1986, Sydney nurse Anita Cobby is abducted, tortured, raped and murdered. When police charge 5 men with the crime, public emotions boil over with mass demonstrations calling for the killers to be executed. 2 months later, an angry crowd gathers once again when the 5 are brought under armed guard to Westmead Coroner's Court for a brief committal hearing.
Die a slow death, you mongrel!
The small courtroom is packed. One of the many onlookers is Anita's father, Gary. It's the first time he has come face to face with Anita's killers.
Their heads were hung. They looked as if they were ashamed. Well, they could have been, because I don't suppose I was a great sight to see for them. But we went through it, got that over.
It's another 5 months before the gang's full committal hearing. They have all pleaded not guilty despite having already made admissions. It's the first time Grace Lynch will lay eyes on her daughter's killers.
It was very harrowing, but it was something we had to do. Otherwise, Anita would have been just another murder victim, and we cared. And we wanted to know the details of what had happened to her, and so it was very hard.
The courageous Miss X, who has coaxed a secretly recorded confession from John Travers, has received death threats from friends of Travers, and she is now in the witness protection program. Derek Hand is the coroner hearing the committal case.
Defendants couldn't care less. Their demeanour was as if it's all a big joke. But they showed no emotion other than, a bit of a lark. I think this is what made it even worse for the public, was their lack of appearing to be remorseful. They didn't even appear to be remorseful, They just carried on.
When a terrified Miss X enters the witness box, she's just metres away from John Travers, who's seething with hatred.
Did you see a teardrop? He said, yeah, that's why I had to kill her.
He was looking at her with hate in his eyes, and he was muttering something and really, really tense. And I nudged Kevin Rowie and I said, just keep your eye on Travers.
You bitch!
And next minute he just lunged for her, yelling out. We intercepted him, grabbed him, and just pushed him back, and someone else got her and got her away.
Get off here! Get off him!
We thought that she wouldn't come back in and give evidence. We thought that she was so scared then that she'd just say, I couldn't go back in. But I think it backfired on him in a sense. She went back and was strong as ever.
March 16th, 1987, a year and 40 days since Anita Cobby was found dead. The trial finally begins before Justice Maxwell in the New South Wales Supreme Court. John Travers then springs a surprise. Realising the evidence against him is overwhelming, he changes his plea to guilty. The trial of the others continues. The lynchers attend every day of the 2-month trial and endure all the gruesome details, as well as the callous attitude of the defendants.
It was just horrific. It's just something I can't imagine anyone doing to another human being. It's just something that it's beyond my thinking.
My main concern was Anita's father. I could not work him out. He was so calm, so cool. I expected him to explode at any minute.
The jury of 7 men and 5 women are also sickened by the evidence and become even more disturbed when they visit the Paddock in Reen Road, where Anita had spent the final tortured moments of her life. After 54 days of gruesome testimony, the jury retires to consider its verdict. 10:20 a.m, Wednesday, June 10th, 1987. It's standing room only at the Supreme Court after word comes through that the jury has reached its decision. The atmosphere is electric as an anxious public gather outside the court. Inside, the lynchers, police and the media hold their breath. Then, the moment of truth. The foreman rises. When the charges against Michael Murdoch, Les, Gary and Michael Murphy are read out, the foreman repeats one word: guilty.
I had been in a lot of courtrooms when sentences were handed down. I had never, ever heard in my life the thunder and applause that happened in that courtroom. The building, the floor shook, people clapped and cheered. Justice Maxwell very, very quickly got the court to stop and told them that it was inappropriate. But there was just jubilation. And I remember leaving the courtroom and there was a bus driver and he skipped out of the courtroom and he was smiling and happy and clapping and talking to everyone. It was like it was a personal victory for him. And this was someone who didn't even know the Lynch family, who didn't know anyone connected with the case, but he'd just been coming in on odd days. And he said he was very relieved and jubilant about the verdict.
Outside the court, there is jubilation at the news. Finally, the ordeal of the trial is over and the lynchers express their relief. They also thank police and the public.
We feel that true justice has shown itself. We're very proud of all the people who've been connected with this case and our daughter.
I just feel relieved and that justice will be done for Anita.
She was the victim of a prolonged and sadistic physical assault.
It's 6 days later and all 5 killers appear again before an emotional Justice Maxwell for sentencing.
Wild animals are given to pack assaults and killings. However, they do so for the purposes of survival.
He sums up the evidence and then says in part,
"Not so these prisoners. They assaulted in a pack for the purpose of satisfying their lust and kill for the purpose of identification. This is one of the most horrifying physical and sexual assaults I've encountered in 40-odd years associated with the law."
His Honour then looks at the defendants and, in sentencing each to life, he says, quote, "The circumstances of each prisoner and the circumstances of Anita Lorraine Cobby's murder prompt me to recommend that the official files of each prisoner should be clearly marked, never to be released."
Absolute elation around the world. I think around Australia it was just people cheering, people crying. They were just so happy that these guys were off the streets forever. And justice, well, some degree of justice had been done and they couldn't do it to anyone else. And I guess a feeling of safety that people could walk the streets again because these guys were gone. So it was good, with a good feeling.
It's now more than 30 years since Anita's life was so cruelly taken, but her memory remains in the hearts of so many Australians who never knew her, but who took her death so personally.
there is pain, there is, well, hurt. At times there's even agony. It's only brief, but it hits you and, oh boy, it's like a rapier going through your heart, you know. And, but you know it's going to come, you can't avoid it, and you've got to just brace yourself. And, ooh, here it goes. It's long, jagged, searing hurt. But it doesn't kill you. It doesn't kill you. I think what it does, it steels you for...
And out of it you just become stronger. You become a stronger person.
Well, what it does, it says...
And you find that little things,
like,
little traumas are nothing.
It's been more than 3 decades since Anita's murder, and we still talk about how close she came to being saved. One report says police were operating a random breath test checkpoint nearby when the gang sped off after abducting Anita. So why weren't they stopped? Were they alerted to slow down by passing motorists flashing their headlights to warn of the police presence? One of the killers, Michael Murphy, died in jail in February 2019. The rest of the gang remains locked away. For much of the time, they've been kept in special protection in jail for fear other prisoners will harm them. That fear proved well-founded when Gary Murphy was rushed into hospital intensive care in June 2019 after a brutal prison bashing in a jail shower block. Gary Lynch died in 2008 and Grace Lynch in 2013. Their names will live on in the Homicide Victims Support Group, a nationwide charity which provides specialised support for families of murder victims. The group was founded in 1993 by Anita's parents in partnership with Christine and Peter Simpson, whose 9-year-old daughter Ebony was murdered in 1992. Among the early victims helped by the group was Angelo Cusimano, who was aged 13 when his father was shot dead in a robbery at his family's shop.
There were three men in motorbike helmets. They turned up on bikes and burst in.
He did not deserve this. If anyone knows anything, please let us know. You're nothing but scum.
It just doesn't affect the adults, it affects so many other people. And over the years, what became quite apparent is these little people that we'd forgotten were growing up into teenagers and adults, and we hadn't catered for them.
I just remember when my mum had a lot of support through Martha, and she always used to say that it's never going to go away, but we're going to have to try to make a new normal to be able to get through.
In the back of my mind, I kept on thinking, we've got to do something more. I just wasn't sure what that more would be.
The solution finally came one day in a phone call to Martha from Angelo Cusimano.
Angelo relayed one of the most heartbreaking stories I've heard, and it was Angelo had taken his newborn son out to the cemetery to meet his dad. It was heartbreaking, but at the same time, I thought, we've got to do something. So went to the committee, I talked to them and I said, we need to set up a trauma centre for children affected by homicide.
With $9 million in funds from government and private donations, the group is building Grace's Place, a refuge centre for homicide-affected families.
So when police ring me now from a crime scene and say, Martha, we're at a crime scene and there are children, I know, and they will know, that when Grace's Place is up and running, there's going to be a safe, nurturing place for them to bring those children.
The support group's patron, Anita's sister, Catherine, explains how Blacktown City Council provided the land for Grace's Place in the suburb of Duneside.
They got on board with the cause and they just felt that Duneside, that was very close to where my parents lived, where I grew up, Anita grew up, and the effect that it had on the community in that area. So I think bringing something good back into that community is really important.
In the words of Gary Lynch, something good has to come out of something so bad. Every time there's a murder, there's a family left behind.